Welcome, folks, to our podcast, Therapy on a Tangent. My name is Natalie. I'm one of our co-hosts here, and I'm joined by Zori, my other co-host.
And Totoro.
And Totoro. Oh, special appearance with Totoro today. So this is a podcast where two therapists are nerding out on our geeky passions. So, yeah, Zori, what are you geeking out on?
So recently I've been watching, okay, so if you don't already know, I like watching other people play video games. Sometimes I like playing video games, but sometimes I like watching other people play video games. And one of my friends has been playing Street Fighter. So I've been watching him. I think it's Street Fighter 6, maybe question mark. Basically it's he's trying to like find his friend Bosch. And in order to find his friend, he has to like fight all these different people and learn from all these different masters. So I've been really, it, like, really been getting into like watching him play that, especially as someone who was like more of a Tekken girly growing up. So yeah, that's what I've been into lately. What about you, Natalie?
Lately, I have picked back up Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, and oh my gosh, it's been like a journey with. So I also have Tears of the Kingdom going at the same time right now. So I didn't play Breath of the Wild when it came out, but when Tears of the Kingdom came out, I was like, okay, I want to play Tears of the Kingdom. I feel like I need to play Breath of the Wild also, though. Um, but I started playing it maybe like a year and a half ago, and then I got distracted as per usual, and so I just kind of put the game down for a little while. So this has been a problem of mine where I will always start like an RPG game, like an adventure RPG game, and then I'll just get distracted, lost in the woods, and then I just never return to the game. So my goal this year is to finish at least one of those. So the three that I have in my back burner right now is Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and Ghost of Tsushima. Because those are great
Mm,
games, but I think I'm
hmm.
literally just standing in the woods for all three of those games because I got distracted by something. I don't even know where, like, what was I doing and where was I going. Like, when I picked up
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild this past week, I was like, why am I in this forest? I'm literally in the forest and I don't know what I'm doing here, and I had no idea what my objective was, but here I am. So,
Yeah, and before that kind of like leads us into our topic of the week, which is RPG games. But before we even really get into like some of the ones that we play, do you mind like telling our listeners who might not know what RPG what that means?
yeah, so RPG is a broad genre of video game so it stands for role playing game. So usually it's story based. Sometimes you have multiplayer, but most of the time they are single player games. And basically you're a character in the game, and you just kind of follow along in the story. A lot of times there's like side quests and things you could do, side stories that you can also do. Um, and then there's different kinds too. Like there's action RPG where it's a lot of like turn-based fighting. There's adventure RPG where you're just kind of like wandering around, gathering stuff like that. There's also like Japanese RPGs, which is also like a genre of video games that's really close to my heart because being Asian, it's like, other Asian people have made video games and I see my people in there, so that's
Hmm.
something that I really enjoy too. So, just that's broadly what RPG games are.
Yeah, I think one of my first, or at least two of my first RPG games that I played when I was younger, was Kingdom Hearts and OG, and then also the Lara Croft games. Like my mom and
Mm.
I, we both like playing that game. Like she would play it, and then whenever we got to a part where she would have to swim, because for whatever reason my mom was bad at making her swim, I would take over controls because I was always better. And that's I always think about that when I think of RPG, like playing video games with my mom.
Yeah, that's real old school. I think that's like PlayStation 1.
Oh, was it? Yeah, maybe. No, PlayStation 2.
PlayStation 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool that you play with your
Um,
mom though. I feel like it's cool to be in a family where your parents game too, so it doesn't feel like it's a abnormal thing to just be like playing video games at home as a hobby, and it's a bonding thing that you do with your parents and your family too.
Yeah, I when I took the Switch to my apartment, I had to be like, I'm taking the Switch, Mom, and she's like, it's a house of Switch. And I'm just like, when was the last time you touched it? There's dust. There's a fine layer of dust on this. So yeah, but my mom initially got me into playing like the old school arcade games like Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Galactica and stuff like that. And then when we got the PlayStation 2, of course, I asked for it from Santa, and Santa gave me the PlayStation 2 and Kingdom Hearts, and he also gave my mom Lara Croft. So,
Nice. Kingdom Hearts is also one of my favorite RPG games. Also another game that I have yet to complete.
yeah, I have okay. Let's. Can we be honest, Natalie? Let's be honest. I have never finished the first Kingdom Hearts game. I have never finished, but I started the second Kingdom Hearts game, not finishing the first one. But like I at that time I just found out like what happened the first, and I was just like, yeah, okay, we're gonna move on to the second game. Still haven't finished the second game. Didn't even waste my time trying to buy a new platform and the third game. I went over to a friend's house who was playing the third game. Got so confused. I still need to like just sit down, find one of those like YouTube videos where they explain what's going on because now it's like expanded way beyond way beyond comprehension. I don't even know what's happening. I don't even know what's going on. I don't know who is actually real versus who was created. Like that game has so many layers and stuff like that. But yeah, it still has a very special heart like place in my heart because it was like one of the first games where I felt like this was my game, you know, and not like a game that my mom was like imparting on me from like her generation. So
I also think that Kingdom Hearts is a very nice mix of like Western and Japanese RPG because you got your Disney characters in there and you got like your Final Fantasy characters in there too. So I
mhm.
thought it was a really cool game just to be able to like merge the cultures.
Yeah, and then you know the best part, or at least my favorite part about Kingdom Hearts, you have Utada Hikaru. When you walk away. Okay, I won't sing, but like I still have that on my iPod, and I still like play that almost every
It's a
day. So
vibe, you know. Like sometimes you're just in that kind of vibe and you're just like playing. That's the background music of your life.
yeah, yeah. But okay, so you're playing, or you're trying to get through Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, and what was the last one?
Ghost of Tsushima. So I don't. Have you heard of that
Okay,
one?
Ghost of Tsushima. Yes, I have, and I haven't watched anyone play it, but I've heard really good things about it. I heard it's really good, like story wise, which is what I love.
Yeah, it's a beautifully designed game, and story wise, it's really good. So it's about a samurai, and it's historical too. So it takes place. I forgot what era, but an era where the samurais ran about in the world, and basically like a bunch of samurais are being executed and killed. There's a takeover, and me, the main character, I am trying to I guess get to the enemies and avenge my father who got killed during this war. So I'm just
Hmm.
kind of like a wandering samurai, which is pretty cool. The problem with it, the problem and the best part of it, is that there's so many like side things that you can be doing. So literally everything in that
Mm,
game is a distraction. Like you see a fox, if you follow the fox, it'll take you to a shrine. You see a bird, it might take you to like some I don't know, some item that you haven't discovered yet. So it's like
hmm
literally anything out in the wild could lead you to something. So
hmm
that's how I go from like, oh, I'm on my way to the main storyline, trying to do my missions like I'm supposed to, and then all of a sudden I see a bird flying. And I'm like, where's that bird leading me to? So I follow the
hmm
bird, and then all of a sudden I'm in the woods, and I don't know where I am, and I have no idea, like where I'm trying to go or what was I doing before that. So that's how I end up in the woods.
Yeah, I know that like with RPGs, there's like kind of varying levels of like side quests. There's some that they may have like side quests that are just like really short, but for the most part, they'll keep you on the main story track. But then there's side tracks, or RPGs where they're like stuff where you can spend hours just doing the side quests. Like I think so. I'm also playing, or I also have Tears of the Kingdom, and that's part of the reason why I probably have not gotten so far because I always get distracted. I'm always like, wait, what do I actually need to do for the main quest? And sometimes in some games you have to do the side quests to be able to get some of the items or whatever needed for the main game, but it can be really hard. And I will admit, I'm totally one of those people who are just like, this is hard. Let me go into Google and find out a playthrough so I can just figure out how to get through this really quickly because I don't want to spend any more time. I just want to get back to the main quest.
Yeah. So I'm the opposite. I'm like stubbornly trying to figure out how to do something, even if it means like it's almost like a brains over brawn situation. It's like I'm gonna brawn my way into this. Like if I just like fight hard enough, I'm going to be able to beat this. And that's the wrong approach probably most of the time because like especially in Tears of the Kingdom, so much of it I think is like puzzles and brain power and stuff. So when I'm just trying to like
Mm-hmm.
brute force my way through something, it's not working.
Yeah, and I think we're both on like completely opposite ends because I'm just like, this is hard. I'm frustrated. This is not fun anymore. Let me see what other people who've gone through this, and I'm just like, okay, follow the directions, follow the directions, which is probably not great as well. Like, I'm not allowing myself to think critically, but also some when I'm playing video games, I don't want to have to think too much.
Yeah, but
So,
RPG games are actually, as like a geeky therapist, that is one of the metaphors I use the most in therapy. Because if you really
mm,
think about it, you're just kind of doing the RPG game of life. And the character that you're playing is yourself. Right? So it's like when
mhm,
you integrate aspects of like an RPG game, like that is literally what we are doing in real life. We're like trying to figure out like what the main storyline is, like what is my purpose in life. You get distracted by a side quest because something caught your interest, and then you're all of a sudden you're lost and confused, and you're just trying to figure your way back. So I use that analogy a whole lot, and I think it's really helpful for clients too because like they start to see themselves in the RPG games that they play, and they start to notice
mhm.
like characteristics about themselves, I guess, and how does that actually relate in real
Mm,
life? Because in real life, it's like things do catch my interest. I do get distracted. I do end up like last episode we talked about me like going mushroom foraging. Like that was like one of the biggest side quests of my life, where I was just like, oh, I'm literally gonna go wander into the woods and see if I could like pick mushrooms. That's literally like my RPG fantasy. That is what I do in video games, especially like
mhm,
Legend of Zelda. I literally get to wander into the forest and pick mushrooms.
mm. Yeah, and I guess that makes sense because in my real life, I'm just like, nope, don't want to do side quests. Just tell me how can I get to X, Y, and Z. I am like that type of friend where it's like something's not working. I tried at least the things I know are supposed to work. Let me Google or let me, ask a friend type of thing. So I guess that makes sense. I'm like, no side quests, no foraging side quests for me.
But I guess like, does that feel too rigid for you? That you're just always trying to do the objective?
I guess it depends. So I guess I'm thinking of like either something research related or something work related. I want to just get the objective done with. Um, and I think part of that is just because there has to be an easier way. Like, why work harder when I can work smarter? I think if I didn't have to worry about being in a capitalistic society, or if I just didn't have to like work, I do think I do go down like side quests, like rabbit holes where I'm just like, ooh, this is interesting. Ooh, this is interesting. Ooh, this is interesting. So I think naturally I kind of want to do that, but also when it comes to maybe time limits, maybe how much energy I have. I already know, like, okay, you can also find this online. You can also find the playthrough of how to get through this hard puzzle online.
Yeah, I mean that's the difference of like the brains versus bronze we were talking about, and like I do use my brains when I do need to, but I think there's something that makes life feel a little bit more enjoyable if I'm able to just kind of like wander and thinking in kind of like a mindful way. I think being able to just wander is so mindful. Like you're just present with the world. You're just kind of seeing like where life takes you. Because I
Mhm.
personally don't like the rigidity of like this is the path that I've decided to walk down, and now I'm going to follow it. Because it's like, well, what if it's not fun anymore? Like I'm sure for you, it's like, okay, well, I need to complete this research, so I'm gonna do it. But for me, it's like, I don't want to burn myself out doing the research,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna do a couple side quests and then eventually get back to like finishing the research.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, being completely honest, like mindfulness practice is something that I still need to work on, even as a therapist. So, but I do think now that I'm like thinking more about this, like I do weigh what I do. I think that's also, you can see that in RPG. I'm like, okay, do I really need to do this side quest, or can I not do this? Like, is this side quest going to actually give me an item or something? And actually, when I think about it, I told a colleague, and I think I've even told like some students this. I was just like, okay, is what I'm doing in real life, is it either something that is directly connected to my goal? Is it not directed to my goal, but it'll give me skills to get closer to my goal? Or is it something that I at least enjoy? And I think maybe I'm like stretching this like metaphor too far, but like I can see how that can also be related. Like how I play RPGs could also be related to how I navigate. Where I'm just like, is it goal related? Is it at least skill related? Or is it at least fun? If not, I'm not doing it. And maybe that's why I don't finish the RPGs because they stop being fun.
Well, I mean, I think that makes sense. I think it's part of like the purpose of like why do we do things in the first place. I think even like the skill building piece is important. I think like that's something that we don't really think about in video games. Like what skills are we trying to build? I don't know if you've played like the RPG games where you get to like pick your class. I
Hmm.
feel
Hmm.
like that like talks a lot about like who you are as like a person, kind of what your natural inclinations are, because it kind of distills down like what are the skill sets you're trying to acquire in life. Like warrior
Hmm.
classes, they're trying to focus on like strength and being able to accomplish a lot of things through like a physical way. And then there are like kind of your mage classes where it's a little bit more supportive. Typically, they're
Hmm.
healers and things like that. And then there are tanks, I guess, people who just take all the damage and they're able to withstand it. Like they have high distress tolerance, stuff like that. So, like,
Hmm.
for you, have you thought about what does it mean when you pick a class in a game that you play?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that when I do have those options, I kind of go for the more magical. Like if it's like high magic, less brawn, then I'm just like, yes, magic. Um, and then if that's not an option, then I either want like either smarts or charisma. I feel like brawn is always like the last thing I pick. Like I want some brawn, or like if like being able to heal myself, is something that I can pick. So a part of me feels like I would really love like Dungeons and Dragons. I just never find anyone to play with. But yeah, I definitely feel like I would go for like the magic, the smarts, the charisma, the healing before I go for like the tank type of player.
Yeah. And I guess for me, it's very similar. That I do tend to go toward like more magical characters, like more mage classes, which I think makes sense as like both of us being counselors. I feel like wanting to care for people, heal ourselves. Sometimes like being a healer for me is about like preservation in life. It's like it's more like I don't trust people to heal me when I need them to heal me. And so I rather have the power to do that myself. And so sometimes that's what
Hmm.
motivates me to be a healer because, like, in a team game, sometimes it's like I don't trust that somebody's going to get to me in time to heal me. So, like, I'd rather be the one who can heal myself. Um, Interestingly,
Yeah.
when I describe kind of what what my character or like my class is usually like when I play games, I describe it as like an aggressive support, which is like that mix of like being able to like heal people, support people if needed, heal myself, but
Hmm.
then I want to be strong too. So I want to be able to like be in the
Hmm.
front lines, fight, attack people, and things like that. And I
Want to
find,
be Sakura from Naruto.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But I think it's like for me, that's a nice balance of like I'm self sufficient and I could contribute to others, but also like in certain games, that's also a detriment because some games, the healing support characters are not meant to be attackers either. So
Hmm.
sometimes I'm just kind of going into something knowing that I'm probably going to set myself up to like fail or give myself a hard time because I want to be like in the front lines fighting.
Yeah, and I think that's also like a really good thing to point out about RPG games, especially those type where you do kind of get to select what skill or class you want to be, because there's always like yes, there's the benefits, but there's always some sort of downside, and like yes, you could be able to heal yourself, you could be able to heal other people, but that means like now you're like -5 in terms of like defense. And I think that's something super important to think about because I feel like sometimes a lot of our clients might also be like, yes, I want to heal people, I want to help people, but then like, what does that mean in terms of your well-being? Maybe in other areas like physical. Like, if you're so concerned about taking care of other people, how's your physical health? How's your mental health? And I think that's also like something really interesting to talk about with clients when we're using RPG as a way to help them understand not only how they navigate life, but also some of the areas where, like, okay, sure, you're going to be this healer, you're going to be this magical girl, but now what does that mean in terms of the other areas of your life that you may not be focusing as much on? And unlike RPG games, we can sometimes give more focus to those areas. Or maybe like RPG games, instead of putting all of our points, all of our skill class points in like one area, maybe we should be a little bit more mindful about putting at least a few in the other areas as well.
Yeah, and using that analogy with clients too, like sometimes you're born with a certain skill set that you're more inclined to, and you're not going to be able to acquire some of the other skills well, and that's okay. But I think like going back to using like RPG games as like the analogy, it's like you can still find items out there in the world, right? Like
Hmm.
as like a mage class or something, I could pick up a weapon that's like super super strong, and I could still like fight very well. So I think like that's a way for clients to think about it too. That like maybe you're not naturally inclined to be like a fighter, but are there
Hmm.
certain items, other things that you can do to help like support that? And some of that is about like what tools do we have in the world. Like I
Hmm.
think about clients where like they have executive functioning issues, so like maybe memory's not so good and stuff like that. And for some reason, I guess this is part of like wanting to brute force your way through a game. Sometimes it's like clients are like, if I just try hard enough to remember things, it will happen. And I'm just like,
Hmm.
but your brain also isn't wired that way. And so like sometimes we have to find other tools to help us with that. And so that's the act of like acquiring an item that helps you with like remembering things. So that's like sticky notes, phone reminders, things like that. And I don't think there's any shame in that because that still makes you a good character. Like you're able to adapt to a situation. Like sure, maybe you're deficient in some of these things, but it doesn't mean that like you can't pick up an item and still be just as good in like navigating the world.
Yeah, I mean, if you could see my desk right now, you'll see sticky notes everywhere reminding me to do things. So, exactly. Um, I'm also thinking about RPGs in the sense of kind of exploring. I mean, we kind of been talking about this, but also kind of like something that just came out is like using RPGs, like the video games, to kind of explore our ideal self, kind of like think about what we and counselors or other mental health professionals call like the magic wand question. Like, what would your life look like if whatever your problem was no longer a problem? And I can definitely see people using RPGs to kind of have that. Like, you know, you may not feel like you have a lot of control in your life, so playing an RPG like Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, where you get to play this hero where people will look up to him, people support him, Link, the character. So just thinking about that, and that just came to mind as well as we were talking about like different classes.
Yeah, and this is actually something that I love talking with clients about too. When I'm talking with like another gamer client, or maybe somebody that even does like D&D, I like talking to them about like their character and what decisions that they make in designing their character, either by like their class choice or the outfits, even the gender that they decide in the game and stuff like that. Because the way that I think about it is that we do put ourselves in the characters that we play, and that's either a version of ourselves that we think is true, or it's our idealized versions of ourselves, or it's a mixture of both. And so I'm always curious about with clients like what parts of the character that you created is you actually in real life and what parts of it is an idealized version, because I think that's something that's so great about video games is that we actually get to create like an idealized version of ourselves. And for like some people, in particular like people who struggle with like gender dysmorphia, sometimes people feel
Hmm.
so much more comfortable with just being able to like choose the skin that they wear if they want to identify as a male character or a female character. I don't think we have any characters out there right now in video games that are more non-binary that you could play, but hopefully that's like kind of where we're moving in the future too, to be being able to explore like gender identity and character creation.
Well, there's I think Baldur's Gate,
Oh, okay.
they have some non-binary characters, or at least the characters that you design for yourself can be non-binary. So I definitely think they're moving that way. And actually, I mean, there's multiple movies that like talked about these elements or these things. What comes to mind though for me in terms of like a movie that talks about like RPG and like allowing yourself to be this ideal version is this movie called Belle. It's kind of like Beauty and the Beast esque. And it's basically about this girl who gone through her own trauma, but she joins like this virtual RPG game, and she's like this diva. This everyone loves her, everyone looks to her, everyone thinks she's awesome, and vastly different from her real life, where she's like very shy, very quiet, and dealing with some of a loss that she had in her family. So, yeah, I was just thinking about that. And as you said before, I've also had like clients who are working through some gender dysphoria who play RPGs because they can allow themselves to dress up to be who they ideally would want to be.
Yeah, and I think that's a really cool part about video games, just like having that freedom, because you get to test out what it's like to be this character. In the real world, I think it's so threatening to go out and like test out like a new name or test out some new like characteristics you want to exhibit. But like in a video game,
Hmm.
it feels more contained. Even being able to like interact with people online and having that degree of separation to see like how do people receive me when I test out being the certain way. I think that's like
Hmm.
almost like that half step toward doing that in real life. Because if it's okay in like a video game and we start to get used to that idea that like I can be this way, then it's easier to translate that out into the world. And it builds confidence for people too. It's like, oh, so I
Hmm.
can exhibit ways to like advocate for myself or ways for me to be stronger in situations or even like tolerate like the stress that's happening in a game.
Hmm.
If I'm able to do it in a video game, that means this is an innate ability or skill that I'm building, and that means I could also translate that out into other settings.
Yeah, and I think you also see this. I know this is like slightly it's connected to video games, but not. But I think you also see this in like cosplay community as well. You know, people who are able to, whether it's video game characters, book characters, whoever, dress themselves up as those characters, dress them those that they relate to, that they see themselves in, and become this like completely new person. And especially for those who kind of like I don't know if this is like all that they do, but they spend a lot of their time. This is like a really important hobby for them. It's like such a drastic difference. And in terms of not only how they appear, but also how they hold themselves versus when they're out of cosplay. Sometimes they don't always hold themselves that way because they're not channeling that character anymore. So I think it's very interesting to think about in terms of ideal selves again.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty cool. I have clients who do cosplay as well, and they always it's interesting for them to observe themselves be different than how they normally are because they'll go to like a convention or something in cosplay and then they're able to like channel characteristics of this character that they idealize and they're able to
Hmm.
do things. They're more confident. Like I have clients who are more like shy and anxious, but then when they're in character, it's easier for them to be able to like talk to people, to interact with people without being anxious because in their minds it's like I'm not being myself, I'm being this character. But what that
Hmm.
means is that you yourself is still able to do it. It's not like in movies or video games where it's like you channel the spirit of something and it comes upon you and
Hmm.
that person takes over. It's like
Yeah.
you're still the person who's doing all those things. So I think that's just so great for people to like build confidence and being able to like do things in real life.
Yeah. Build confidence, but also realize that even as you are, playing around with this new identity or new sense of self, that it's still your responsibility, whatever actions you do, whether good or bad, that this is something that you are doing, even if you're channeling someone else. You're not being possessed. This is not the spooky month.
Yeah. And actually that's a really good thought because I was just thinking about like my progression of like character classes as I'm like growing up too because I've been a lifelong gamer. So I've been playing video games for a very long time. And actually when I was younger, I played a lot of like the rogue classes. So I was more like
Mm,
the people who are like kind of on my own. It's all me. I'm doing things for me and I don't care about other people kind of things. Like I'm still helpful and stuff, but it's like a lot of the rogue classes, their characteristics and skills are about like sneaking around, being like fiercely independent, looking out for themselves. And some in some instances, I think rogue classes are also portrayed to be like towing that line of like good and evil too, because you
hmm.
can do some things that would be perceived as like evil, because that might be in the
Hmm.
best interest of like yourself. And then when I think about and reflect on that in my life, like what does that mean for where I was in life, especially as like a teenager, I think that was about me learning to be independent and also trying to
Hmm.
figure out like that line of like what's good and bad, really. Because it's also in discovering myself, I'm trying to preserve myself at the same time. And so, like, sometimes the actions I
Hmm.
take is about preserving me as a person, even if it meant that I harmed another person. And that's like developing my sense of morals too at that age.
Hmm.
So it's just interesting to see like how I developed from being kind of like a rogue class where it's like I can only count on me and I'm gonna grow myself and look after myself to like being more of like what I was saying like an aggressive support where I want to be able to like support and care for people but at the same time still be independent enough to like defend myself in the case something happens.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. I was thinking about like where do I land? And I feel like instead for me, it's less about the class and it's more about the type of genre of RPG. So like I went from like being like, yes, main character, saving the world, magical girl, type of, and like now I'm just like, no one has time for that. So now I'm just more drawn to like the Kobe RPG, like Stardew Valley and stuff like that, where like I still get to help people, just like, Sora from Kingdom Hearts gets to help people, but it's more like realistic. It's more like this is actually within my realm. I don't have to necessarily kill myself or put myself in like very dangerous situations to still be helpful to my community. So yeah, I think that's very interesting to like think about our evolution.
Yeah. And I talk to clients about this too. Like this comes up. Like do you have like main character energy right now? And I think that's what a lot of like the the kids are talking about these days. Like what are we doing in life? Are we trying to have like main character energy, or are we just trying to be like a side character? And I don't think there's like a right or wrong choice to all that. I think there are times in our lives where we're going to want to like have main character energy, where we want to take like control over our lives. We want to determine the path we're going on. We're very like driven to go a certain way. And then there are other times where we just want to be more like NPCs, like in the background, right?
Hmm.
NPCs, for people who aren't gamers, are non playable characters. So they're usually the people who are you're just like talking to in a town or something, and they may contribute a word of wisdom, or it could be absolutely meaningless. But there's somebody that doesn't really quite matter in a game, but they're just like living life in the game. And I think for some people,
Hmm.
like, that's nice to just be able to, like, live life and not feel like you have to be so, like, goal oriented, direction oriented, or, like, trying to make these, like, big decisions happening in life. Like you were saying, like, it's nice to just be able to walk around town in Stardew Valley. You know, just do your normal everyday things that are pretty inconspicuous, like farming, fishing, mining, stuff like that.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So, Zori, I'm curious, when you play like RPG games, are you somebody who's like an achievement hunter, like trying to get all the random little side quest things, or are you just like on with the storyline?
So I think I'm someone who's really just interested in the storyline. So as I mentioned, I think in this episode and in the previous episode, I really like to watch other people play video games. Partially because one, I never finished video games myself, and then two, because um, I think they because they are more of a completionist, so basically people who want to explore every part of the video game, they see things that I don't see, but sometimes they're just like, "Oh, let me go explore this room before I go to this next part where I know it's going to like move forward the storyline." And I'm just like, "No, move forward the storyline. You don't there's nothing in this room, dude. There's nothing in this room." And and I think that says a lot about my level of patience sometimes. And I think, as we mentioned earlier in this episode, how I'm kind of just like, let's get to the end, let's get to the goal, no sidetrack, no side quest, focus. So I think sometimes because of that, because there are some RPGs where you need to do a side quest in order to move forward with the main quest, that's oftentimes where I like peace out and start a new game.
Oh man, so I feel like I'm the opposite of you. I am the person that's like, Bazori, what if there's something in that cave that we missed? And we gotta go back and look. So that's also why like I don't complete a lot of RPG games, because like I'm in every single like nook and cranny looking for any of the hidden things that's happening. And I do like I brought up Achievement Hunter because like it's such a satisfying feeling when like I get a trophy because I have found all the hidden things in a game. And so
Hmm.
like that's almost like a motivation for me to try to look for things in games, but it's also like it scratches the itch of like curiosity, and I think that's very true in my life too. I always want to know like, oh, what's over there? What can possibly be over there? Um, and for me, it's not so much about achieving a goal. Like I'll get there eventually, but I also kind of want to see what else is out there, because perhaps I'm gonna find something cool that I never thought of before. Something that I feel like is very relevant in like therapy is when we talk
Hmm.
with clients about like stopping to smell the roses. Because I feel like you're somebody
Hmm.
who's like, I don't got time to smell the roses. I'm on my way somewhere, so I don't have time for this.
I know, and that's something that I need to work on. Is like, especially kind of again going back to the RPG metaphor. There's a lot of RPGs now where they're like, if you want a good ending, you have to do these side quests. So I guess in my real life, I'm starting to realize like, okay, there are certain things where, sure, if I just do the main quest of life, that'll get me to ideally my goal quicker. But will that make me happier, you know. So
Mm.
I'm trying to take more time, allow myself to do more side quests. I think a good example of this is so at the time that we're recording this episode, I think a week from now, there's going to be like this walkathon, and I'm just like, I don't want to do that. But a friend invited me, and I know I'm the type of person who, for the most part, if you invite me to do anything outside, I'll just be like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And I'll be like that in my head all up until I'm actually there. And then when I'm actually there, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm having so much fun. This is great. And I feel like that's my side quest where I'm just like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But then when I force myself to do it, usually I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did this. So I'm starting to realize, I'm starting to get better that, you know, sometimes you need to take life side quests.
Yeah, I feel like this is a societal thing that we're trying to like work on in general for people. Because I feel like I have a lot of these conversations, especially with like young adults, about like, when you're in your 20s, you're trying to figure out like what is the purpose of my life, like what am I working
Mm-hmm.
toward. And I think the reality is that like you don't know what you don't know. And so I think we live in an age where life isn't so straightforward anymore. It used to be like go to school, go to college, get a job, buy a house, have a family, and then life will be good, right? It's so like
Mm-hmm.
this is the path to success. And now we're in
Mm-hmm.
a more complex society where that's not necessarily the path to success. And for a lot of people, that's actually not what's going to bring them like happiness and fulfillment. Because some people don't want to own a house, some
Mm-hmm.
people don't want to have a family, some people don't want to go to college. Um, and so I think like this is where the value of like side quests come in, where you can just kind
Mm-hmm.
of like wander and explore a little bit. Because if all you know is that the process to being successful is to do all these steps, then you're not going to see like what are other possible paths out there that could lead me to happiness. And so I think like that's exactly what you're describing, where it's like I don't want to. It's like out of what I'm familiar with. It's different from what people have told me. And so if I'm gonna go do this thing, what if it's not as good? But then you find out like, oh, this is actually pretty cool and enjoyable. And I think that's why we have to like slow down in our lives too. And I think encourage people to find something a little bit more meaningful in their lives, because I think like people find fulfillment in different things. Um, and part of like being able to figure out what that is like we have to be willing to explore, because again you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know what's
Mm-hmm.
out there, how would you know if there's something out there that might possibly be more fulfilling? And sometimes I try to use that as motivation for my clients to just try to like do something out of their comfort zone, because it's like what if you discovered something that you absolutely love to do, but you had to take that first step of like being uncomfortable first, and then can that
Mm-hmm.
be okay? Like the pros of that outweighs the cons, but you don't know until you actually do it.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe I'll go on a few more side quests and Tears of the Kingdom. We'll see.
I mean, eventually it leads you back to the main storyline. So I don't
Oh,
know.
I want to know what happens to Princess Zelda. I mean, I already know because I don't care about spoilers. I looked online. So, but still.
But that's so hard. Even like that's how I feel in life. Like I just want to know what was the playthrough of my life, and how does it all turn out? Like what do I do to get to the
Mm-hmm.
end? But like what if that's
Not too
not
quickly, though.
maybe that's not the ending that you wanted? What if you want a different ending? Right? And so like that's where you have to kind of take some of the side quests. It'll bring you back to the storyline, the main storyline eventually. But you just get a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more information and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Natalie, speaking of the end, I think it's time for us to end this episode.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to say before we close?
I mean, I'm sure we could talk about this another time and go on tangents about it, but yeah, RPGs are so much I think that we learn about ourselves. So I think like for our listeners, something that I encourage you guys to think about is like what does it mean for yourself? Like, what do you learn about yourself when you're playing RPG games? Because I think that's just a cool thing to think about. And as like an insight-oriented therapist, I always want people to gain more insight on themselves and their lives. So I think this is a cool avenue to explore yourself a little bit more. So I encourage our listeners to do that. But thank you all for listening and joining us today. We'll see you guys at the next podcast. Bye.
Hi, folks.